Welcome to Champion Stories. If this is your first time here, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And now, on to today's story. The humid evening air of General Santos City carried the familiar scent of grilled fish and rice from the nearby Carinderias as Manny Pacquiao stepped out of his black SUV. His designer polo shirt and expensive watch seemed almost out of place in this modest neighborhood, where broken concrete sidewalks told stories of decades past. Yet his eyes held the same determined spark that had carried him from these very streets to boxing immortality. Manny walked slowly toward a small weathered house with faded blue paint peeling from its wooden walls. The sound of children playing echoed from nearby alleys, their laughter mixing with the distant hum of jeepneys navigating the narrow roads. A rusty gate creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a tiny front yard where a few potted plants struggled to bloom despite the harsh tropical sun. Inside the house, Edmund Villamore sat hunched over a small wooden table, his weathered hands carefully wrapping medical tape around worn boxing gloves. At 68 years old, Edmund's fingers moved with the practiced precision of someone who had dedicated his entire life to the sweet science. His gray hair was thinning, and deep lines etched his face like a roadmap of countless hours spent in dimly lit gyms, shouting instructions and wiping blood from young fighters' faces. The modest living room surrounding Edmund spoke of a life lived simply. A single electric fan rattled overhead, providing little relief from the oppressive heat. Faded photographs covered one wall, showing Edmund with various fighters throughout the decades. Most prominent among them was a picture of a skinny 12-year-old boy with fierce eyes and clenched fists, standing next to a younger Edmund outside a makeshift gym. Edmund paused in his work, setting down the gloves as a sharp pain shot through his lower back. The years of bending over to adjust stances, demonstrating footwork, and carrying heavy equipment had taken their toll on his aging body. He reached for a small bottle of pain medication on the table, his movements slow and deliberate. The prescription label bore his name alongside instructions he could barely afford to follow consistently. Outside the sound of an approaching vehicle broke the evening's rhythm. Edmund glanced toward the window, wondering who might be visiting at this hour. Most of his neighbors worked long days in the tuna canneries or as jeepney drivers, returning home exhausted and focused on their own families. Visitors were rare in this forgotten corner of the city. Manny stood at the front door, his heart heavy with memories that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. This house held the foundation of everything he had become. Within these walls, Edmund had taught him more than just how to throw a punch or slip a jab. He had instilled discipline when Manny's world was chaos, provided meals when hunger was a constant companion, and offered guidance when the streets threatened to claim another lost soul. The weight of the car keys in Manny's pocket felt heavier than any championship belt he had ever carried. Tonight's gesture wasn't about gratitude alone, though Edmund certainly deserved recognition for nurturing a world champion from nothing. The real reason Manny had come here, the truth that had driven him across the city with urgency, was something Edmund didn't yet know. Earlier that afternoon, Manny had received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end had been clinical, professional, and devastating in its matter-of-fact delivery. The words still echoed in his mind as he raised his hand to knock on the door that had welcomed him countless times as a hungry, desperate child seeking something more than survival. The surprising reason behind tonight's gift would soon reshape everything Edmund thought he knew about his former student's success. The wooden door opened slowly, revealing Edmund's surprised face illuminated by the dim light from inside. His eyes widened as recognition dawned, and for a moment, time seemed suspended between the present and memories of a shared past. Edmund's calloused hand gripped the doorframe as he steadied himself, still processing the unexpected sight of his former student standing before him. Manny's presence filled the small doorway, yet his posture remained humble, almost apologetic for the intrusion. The years had transformed the scrawny boy Edmund remembered into a global icon, but something in Manny's eyes carried the same vulnerability that had first drawn the old trainer's protective instincts decades ago. Edmund stepped aside, gesturing for Manny to enter with the same weathered hand that had once guided countless punches toward heavy bags. The living room felt even smaller with Manny inside, his success creating an invisible barrier that both men acknowledged but neither addressed. Edmund moved slowly toward his worn armchair, his movements betraying the pain that had become his constant companion. The silence between them stretched comfortably, filled with unspoken understanding. Edmund's gaze drifted to the photographs on the wall, lingering on images that captured moments when dreams were just beginning to take shape. In one picture, a teenage Manny stood dripping with sweat after a particularly grueling training session, his face a mixture of exhaustion and determination that Edmund had recognized as championship material. Manny's eyes followed Edmund's gaze, settling on a photograph he hadn't seen in years. The image showed Edmund teaching him proper stance outside a small gym that no longer existed, demolished years ago to make way for a shopping center. The memory hit Manny with unexpected force, reminding him of mornings when Edmund would arrive before dawn, carrying rice and dried fish for breakfast they would share before training began. Those meals had been more than sustenance. They were Edmund's way of ensuring Manny had energy for the physical demands ahead. The old trainer had understood that hunger weakened more than just the body, and his quiet generosity had provided stability during the most chaotic period of Manny's young life. Edmund never asked questions about Manny's home situation, never demanded explanations for bruises that weren't from boxing, and never made the boy feel like a burden, despite his obvious need for guidance. Edmund settled into his chair with a soft grunt, the springs creaking under his weight. Age had not been kind to his joints, and the humid climate seemed to intensify every ache and pain that decades of physical labor had etched into his bones. He reached for a small towel on the side table, wiping perspiration from his forehead, despite the fan's efforts to circulate the heavy air. Manny noticed the prescription bottle on the table, its contents visible through the amber plastic. The label indicated medication for chronic pain, expensive treatments that Edmund's meager pension likely couldn't sustain. The sight stirred something deep in Manny's chest, a familiar ache that success and wealth had never fully healed. The phone call from earlier that day had revealed information that changed everything Manny thought he knew about his journey to the top. The revelation had sent him driving through the familiar streets of his childhood, past the small gyms and corner stores where his boxing dreams had first taken root. Every block had brought him closer to this moment, to this conversation that needed to happen before it was too late. Edmund's breathing was slightly labored, a detail that hadn't escaped Manny's trained eye for reading opponents. The old trainer's skin held a pale quality that spoke of more than just age, and his movements carried a careful deliberateness that suggested he was managing pain with every gesture. The car keys in Manny's pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, their metal edges pressing against his palm as he prepared to share the truth that had brought him here tonight. Manny moved toward the wall of photographs, his footsteps careful on the uneven wooden floor that creaked with each step. His fingers traced the air near one particular image without actually touching the glass, as if the memory it contained was too precious to disturb. The photograph showed Edmund's hands wrapping his wrists before his very first amateur fight, a ritual that had become sacred between them over the months of training. That first fight had taken place in a cramped gym across town, where the smell of sweat and liniment created an atmosphere thick with dreams and desperation. Manny remembered how his stomach had churned with nervous energy, while Edmund's steady presence had provided an anchor of calm. The old trainer had positioned himself in Manny's corner that night, shouting instructions that cut through the crowd's noise and guided every movement in the ring. Edmund shifted in his chair, watching Manny with eyes that held decades of stories. His own memories drifted to those early days, when the skinny boy had appeared at his gym like a ghost, arriving before sunrise and staying until the last light faded from the windows. Edmund had seen something special in Manny's hunger, not just for food, but for purpose and belonging that boxing could provide. The training had been brutal by necessity. Edmund believed that champions were forged through adversity, and he had pushed Manny beyond what seemed possible for someone so young and undernourished. Morning runs through the empty streets were followed by hours of technique work, then strength training with improvised equipment that Edmund had assembled from discarded materials and pure ingenuity. Manny's gaze moved to another photograph showing Edmund teaching him defensive techniques behind the gym. The old trainer's patience had been infinite, repeating the same movements until they became instinctual. Edmund had understood that muscle memory could mean the difference between victory and defeat, between a future and a life trapped in poverty's endless cycle. The lessons had extended far beyond boxing technique. Edmund had taught Manny about discipline, showing him how small daily choices could compound into extraordinary results. When Manny struggled with anger from his difficult home life, Edmund channeled that energy into training intensity. When despair threatened to overwhelm the young fighter, Edmund provided steady encouragement without false promises or empty platitudes. Edmund's breathing grew slightly more labored as he adjusted his position in the chair. The pain medication on the table represented a daily battle against discomfort that had steadily worsened over recent months. His pension from decades of training fighters barely covered basic living expenses, leaving little room for the comprehensive medical care his condition required. Manny noticed the subtle changes in Edmund's appearance since their last meeting years ago. The trainer's once powerful shoulders now curved slightly inward, and his hands trembled almost imperceptibly when he reached for objects. These signs of decline stirred protective instincts in Manny that Edmund had first awakened during those formative training years. The phone call that afternoon had come from Dr. Rosales at the General Santos Medical Center. The voice had been professional, but tinged with urgency as it delivered information that recontextualized everything Manny believed about his rise to boxing stardom. The revelation had nothing to do with technique, strategy, or natural ability, and everything to do with a sacrifice Edmund had made without ever seeking recognition or acknowledgement. Edmund had quietly excused himself from Manny's life once success became inevitable, stepping back to allow other, more prominent trainers to guide the champion's career. At the time, Manny had assumed this transition was natural progression, the way promising fighters moved from local gyms to international training facilities. The truth, however, painted Edmund's withdrawal in an entirely different light. The car keys pressed against Manny's palm as he turned from the photographs to face the man who had given him everything, including something precious that Manny was only now beginning to understand. The weight of Dr. Rosales' words from earlier that afternoon pressed against Manny's consciousness like a physical burden. The physician had spoken with clinical precision about Edmund's medical history, revealing details that painted a picture of sacrifice so profound that Manny struggled to fully comprehend its implications. The conversation had begun as a routine inquiry about Edmund's current condition, but had evolved into something that fundamentally altered Manny's understanding of his own success story. Edmund remained seated in his worn armchair, unaware that his former student now possessed knowledge about events that had transpired 15 years ago. The old trainer's weathered face showed no indication that he suspected anything unusual about this unexpected visit. His eyes held the same gentle strength that had guided Manny through countless training sessions, the same quiet confidence that had made a frightened boy believe he could become something extraordinary. Manny's mind raced back to a specific period during his early professional career when Edmund had suddenly withdrawn from his training team. At the time, Manny had been devastated by what seemed like abandonment at a crucial moment in his development. Other trainers had quickly filled the void, bringing modern techniques and international connections that accelerated his rise through the professional ranks. The transition had been explained as natural progression, the way talented fighters moved from local mentors to world-class training facilities. Manny had accepted this explanation, though he never stopped feeling grateful for the foundation Edmund had provided. The old trainer had wished him well and stepped back gracefully, claiming that Manny had outgrown what a small-town trainer could offer. Dr. Rosales had painted a different picture entirely. The medical records he referenced told the story of a man who had received a devastating diagnosis during the exact period when he chose to distance himself from Manny's career. Edmund had been informed that he was suffering from a progressive condition that would require expensive or ongoing treatment to manage effectively. The timing had not been coincidental. Edmund had realized that his medical needs would create a financial burden that could potentially impact Manny's career development. Training a future world champion required resources that Edmund's condition would make impossible to provide. Rather than become an obstacle to Manny's dreams, Edmund had made the painful decision to step aside. The sacrifice had been even more profound than simple withdrawal. Dr. Rosales had explained that Edmund had sold his small gym to pay for initial medical treatments, using the proceeds to cover expenses while transitioning Manny to more capable hands. The old trainer had never mentioned his illness to anyone in the boxing community, maintaining the fiction that he was simply passing the torch to better qualified mentors. Manny's chest tightened as he considered the depth of Edmund's selflessness. The man who had invested countless hours in developing his technique, who had provided meals when Manny was hungry, who had believed in his potential when no one else did, had quietly sacrificed his own well-being to ensure nothing interfered with his student's ascent to greatness. Edmund's current living conditions now made heartbreaking sense. The modest house, the careful rationing of pain medication, the worn furniture, and the absence of proper medical equipment all reflected a man who had depleted his resources in service of someone else's dreams. The old trainer had continued working with local fighters when his health permitted, but his earning capacity had been severely limited by his condition. The prescription bottle on the table represented just a fraction of the medical care Edmund actually needed. Dr. Rosales had mentioned that Edmund frequently delayed filling prescriptions when money was tight, enduring unnecessary pain rather than compromise his meager budget for basic living expenses. Manny reached into his pocket, feeling the car keys that represented more than mere transportation. They symbolized an opportunity to finally acknowledge a debt that had remained hidden for 15 years, a chance to honor the man who had given up everything so that Manny's dreams could flourish without impediment. The humid evening air seemed to thicken as Manny pulled the car keys from his pocket, their metal surface warm from contact with his palm. Outside, the sounds of the neighborhood continued their familiar rhythm, children calling to each other across narrow streets, the distant rumble of jeepneys navigating traffic, and the gentle clatter of dishes from nearby kitchens where families gathered for dinner. Edmund noticed the keys immediately, his experienced eyes recognizing their significance, even as confusion flickered across his weathered features. The old trainer's hands rested on the armrests of his chair, fingers that had once wrapped countless bandages, now showing the slight tremor that betrayed his ongoing battle with pain and medication. Dr. Rosales had provided more details during their afternoon conversation, painting a picture of Edmund's sacrifice that extended far beyond simple financial loss. The physician had explained that Edmund's condition required not just medication, but regular physical therapy and specialized equipment that could have significantly improved his quality of life. Instead, Edmund had chosen to endure increasing discomfort rather than divert resources that might somehow impact Manny's training and development. The revelation had struck Manny with the force of a championship-level punch. All these years, he had carried gratitude for Edmund's early guidance, but he had never suspected the true depth of his mentor's devotion. The old trainer had essentially sacrificed his health and financial security to ensure that nothing would hinder Manny's journey from the streets of General Santos to boxing immortality. Edmund's small gym had been more than just a business. It had been his life's work, a place where he had nurtured countless young fighters who saw boxing as their only escape from poverty. The decision to sell it must have been devastating, yet Edmund had made that choice without hesitation when he realized his medical needs might compromise his ability to properly support Manny's development. The timing had been particularly cruel. Edmund's diagnosis had come just as Manny was beginning to attract serious attention from professional promoters and international trainers. It was the moment when Edmund's guidance could have evolved into a lucrative, long-term partnership that would have secured both their futures. Instead, Edmund had stepped aside, allowing others to reap the benefits of the foundation he had so carefully constructed. Manny's gaze moved around the modest living room, taking in details that now carried new meaning. The single electric fan, the carefully repaired furniture, the absence of modern conveniences, all spoke of a man living within severely constrained means. The photographs on the wall, which had seemed like proud memories of past achievements, now represented the only remaining evidence of a career that Edmund had abandoned for someone else's benefit. The prescription bottle on the table contained medication that Edmund could barely afford, forcing him to choose between pain relief and basic necessities like food and utilities. Dr. Rosales had mentioned that Edmund frequently appeared at the clinic seeking free samples or asking about less expensive alternatives to his prescribed treatments. Edmund had never complained, never sought recognition for his sacrifice, and never attempted to contact Manny once his professional career began flourishing under new management. The old trainer had maintained his dignity by allowing everyone to believe that he had simply been surpassed by more qualified mentors, when the truth was that he had voluntarily removed himself from the equation. Manny understood now that the car keys in his hand represented more than a generous gift from a successful student to his former teacher. They were the beginning of an acknowledgement, a way to honor a debt that had remained invisible for far too long. The vehicle waiting outside was just the first step in addressing 15 years of sacrifice that had gone unrecognized and uncompensated. The surprising reason behind this gesture was not gratitude alone, but justice, an attempt to restore what Edmund had given up so that Manny's dreams could flourish without obstacle or impediment. Manny stepped forward, extending his hand toward Edmund with the car keys resting on his open palm. The gesture was simple yet profound, carrying the weight of 15 years of unspoken gratitude and newly discovered truth. Edmund's eyes widened as he stared at the keys, his mind struggling to process their significance and the implications of such an unexpected offering. The old trainer's weathered hands trembled slightly as he looked up at Manny, searching his former student's face for explanation. Edmund's expression revealed a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and the kind of overwhelming emotion that comes when someone receives kindness beyond their ability to comprehend or repay. Manny's presence in the small room seemed to expand as he began explaining the afternoon's revelations, without raising his voice above the gentle tone that had characterized their entire reunion. He spoke of Dr. Rosales' phone call, of medical records that revealed the true timeline of Edmund's withdrawal from his career, and of the sacrifice that had remained hidden for so many years. Edmund's face underwent a transformation as the truth emerged. The careful composure he had maintained throughout their visit began to crack, revealing the vulnerability of a man who had spent decades believing his sacrifice had gone unnoticed and unacknowledged. His eyes reflected the pain of carrying such a burden alone, the weight of choosing between his own well-being and his student's future. The revelation continued as Manny described learning about the sale of Edmund's gym, the medical treatments that had consumed his savings, and the decision to step aside at the precise moment when his guidance could have secured both their financial futures. Each detail struck Edmund like a physical blow, not because of shame, but because of the overwhelming recognition that his choice had finally been understood and valued. Manny's voice carried the weight of profound respect as he explained that the car was not a gift born of simple gratitude, but an acknowledgement of a debt that had accrued interest over 15 years. The vehicle represented the beginning of an effort to restore what Edmund had sacrificed, to provide the comfort and security that should have been his reward for nurturing a world champion. Edmund's hands shook as he reached toward the keys, his fingers hesitating just before making contact with the metal. The gesture represented more than receiving transportation. It was accepting recognition for a sacrifice he had never expected to be discovered or acknowledged. The old trainer's breathing became labored as emotion overwhelmed his typically stoic demeanor. The surprising reason behind Manny's gesture became clear through his explanation. This was not charity or patronizing kindness from a wealthy celebrity to a struggling former mentor. Instead, it was justice, an attempt to provide Edmund with the life he should have had if he had chosen his own well-being over his students' dreams. Manny explained that Dr. Rosales had revealed additional details about Edmund's condition, information about treatments and therapies that could significantly improve his quality of life. The car would provide reliable transportation to medical appointments, eliminating the struggle of depending on jeepneys and tricycles that made every trip to the clinic an ordeal. More importantly, the vehicle represented independence and dignity for a man who had given up both without complaint. Edmund would no longer need to cancel appointments due to transportation difficulties or endure the physical discomfort of cramped public vehicles that aggravated his condition. Edmund's eyes filled with tears that he had held back for years, decades of suppressed emotion finally finding release. The keys in Manny's outstretched hand represented not just transportation, but vindication for a choice that had defined both their lives in ways neither had fully understood until this moment. The old trainer's trembling fingers finally closed around the keys, their weight seeming both insignificant and monumentally heavy as he accepted this unexpected acknowledgement of his sacrifice. Edmund's fingers closed around the car keys with reverent care, as if handling something sacred rather than mere metal and plastic. The weight of the keys seemed to anchor him to a reality he had never dared imagine, recognition for sacrifices he had made in solitude, believing they would forever remain his private burden to bear. Tears traced weathered paths down Edmund's cheeks, each drop carrying years of suppressed emotion and unspoken pain. His shoulders, once broad and powerful from decades of training fighters, now shook with the overwhelming release of feelings he had carefully contained since making his fateful decision 15 years ago. Manny watched his former mentor with profound respect, understanding that this moment represented more than gratitude or charity. It was vindication for a choice that had required Edmund to walk away from everything he had built, trusting that his sacrifice would somehow serve a greater purpose in Manny's journey to greatness. The old trainer's breathing gradually steadied as he absorbed the magnitude of what had just transpired. The car keys represented practical benefits, reliable transportation to medical appointments, independence from the crowded jeepneys that aggravated his condition, and dignity in his daily movements through the city. But their deeper significance lay in the recognition that his sacrifice had not gone unnoticed by the person who mattered most. Edmund rose slowly from his chair, his movements careful but determined. The pain that had become his constant companion seemed momentarily forgotten as he processed the emotional impact of Manny's revelation. His legs, weakened by years of managing his condition with inadequate medical care, carried him toward the front door with newfound purpose. Manny followed, his own emotions stirring as he watched Edmund navigate the small house with dignity intact, despite the obvious physical challenges. The old trainer's resilience in the face of hardship reminded Manny why he had been drawn to this man's guidance during the most vulnerable period of his youth. Outside, the evening light cast long shadows across the modest neighborhood. The car sat parked along the narrow street, its pristine condition contrasting sharply with the weathered surroundings. The vehicle was practical rather than ostentatious, a reliable sedan that would serve Edmund's needs without drawing unwanted attention from neighbors who might wonder about sudden changes in his circumstances. Edmund's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the car, his mind still adjusting to the reality of his new circumstances. The vehicle represented freedom from the daily struggle of navigating public transportation with a painful condition, an end to the humiliation of arriving late to medical appointments because jeepneys were overcrowded or unavailable. The old trainer walked slowly around the car, his weathered hands trailing along its surface with something approaching disbelief. Years of careful budgeting, of choosing between medication and meals, of enduring discomfort rather than seeking proper medical care, had conditioned him to expect hardship as his permanent reality. Manny observed Edmund's reaction with quiet satisfaction, understanding that this gesture addressed only the beginning of what needed to be corrected. Dr. Rosales had mentioned other aspects of Edmund's care that required attention, specialized treatments, physical therapy, and medical equipment that could significantly improve his quality of life. The car was symbolic of a larger commitment Manny had made during his drive through the familiar streets of his childhood. Edmund's sacrifice deserved more comprehensive recognition, a systematic effort to restore the security and comfort he had surrendered without complaint or expectation of acknowledgement. Edmund's fingers traced the door handle as he prepared to enter his new vehicle for the first time. The gesture was tentative, as if he feared the moment might dissolve if he moved too quickly or presumed too much. The surprising reason behind Manny's gift had transformed from hidden debt to acknowledged obligation, creating a foundation for healing that had been 15 years in the making. Edmund settled into the driver's seat with careful movements, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel as tears continued flowing down his cheeks. The interior of the car smelled of new upholstery and possibility, a stark contrast to the cramped, diesel-scented jeepneys that had been his primary means of transportation for years. The seat adjusted to accommodate his aching back, providing support he hadn't experienced since his condition began limiting his mobility. Manny stood beside the open driver's window, watching as Edmund familiarized himself with the vehicle's controls. The old trainer's fingers explored the dashboard with wonder, touching buttons and switches that represented conveniences he had never expected to possess again. The air conditioning hummed quietly, providing immediate relief from the oppressive humidity that typically made every journey an endurance test. The engine started smoothly with Edmund's tentative turn of the key, its quiet purr replacing the rattling uncertainty of public transportation. For the first time in years, Edmund could travel according to his own schedule, arriving at medical appointments refreshed, rather than exhausted from overcrowded vehicles that jarred his painful joints with every pothole and sudden stop. As Edmund slowly pulled away from the curb, Manny watched the taillights disappear around the corner, carrying his former mentor toward a future that had suddenly become more manageable. The car represented practical improvements that would compound over time, better medical care due to reliable transportation, reduced physical stress from comfortable seating, and restored dignity that comes with independence. The surprising reason behind Manny's gift had evolved throughout the evening from hidden debt to acknowledged obligation to profound connection. The revelation of Edmund's sacrifice had recontextualized every success in Manny's career, adding depth and meaning to achievements that now carried the weight of another person's selfless contribution. Dr. Rosales had agreed to provide ongoing consultation about Edmund's medical needs, with Manny quietly arranging to cover expenses that the old trainer's insurance couldn't manage. The car was just the beginning of a comprehensive effort to restore the quality of life that Edmund had surrendered, without complaint or expectation of recognition. Over the following weeks, Edmund's neighbors noticed subtle changes in his routine. He arrived at the local market with less visible discomfort, visited the medical clinic more regularly, and seemed to carry himself with renewed confidence. The car had provided more than transportation. It had restored his sense of agency and control over his daily circumstances. Manny returned to his training camp with a deeper understanding of the foundation that had supported his entire career. Every championship belt, every victory celebration, every moment of glory now carried the knowledge that Edmund's sacrifice had made it all possible. The old trainer had stepped aside at the crucial moment, ensuring that nothing would hinder Manny's ascent to greatness. The story of the car gift eventually circulated through the boxing community, though the full details of Edmund's sacrifice remained private between the two men. Those who heard about Manny's gesture understood it as typical generosity from a champion known for helping others, unaware of the profound debt that had finally been acknowledged. Edmund's medical condition gradually improved with consistent treatment and reduced stress from daily transportation struggles. His pain levels decreased, his mobility increased, and his overall quality of life showed marked improvement. The car had catalyzed a transformation that extended far beyond mere convenience. Months later, when Manny returned to General Santos City, he found Edmund working with young fighters again, his renewed health allowing him to share his knowledge with another generation of dreamers. The old trainer's eyes held the same gentle strength that had guided Manny through his formative years, now supplemented by the peace that comes from having one's sacrifices recognized and honored. The surprising reason behind the car gift had become a foundation for healing that would continue benefiting both men for years to come. Thank you for watching another episode of Champion Stories. If you enjoyed today's story, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring tales about Manny Pacquiao. Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one, and many times your ideas inspire our next episode. See you next time.